Hi, and welcome to another edition of Samba News. I'm your host, Dwayne. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, we really do appreciate it. Now, for those of you who have been with us for a long time, you may have noticed some changes around here. And yeah, your eyes are not deceiving you. But yeah, we are actually making some changes. Now, in the past, when we would do broadcasts, we're talking about the news or things like that, we usually are taking it at a much slower pace. And those broadcasts will typically go about close to 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours, and all of that. So we're trying something different. If you see the title of this channel, it's called Samba Journeys, meaning that the destination is the same, which is truth, but the scenery is going to change. So you're going to see little changes here and there and little tweaks and stuff here along the way. Even if you go through, if for those of you who are brand new and this is your first time here, if you go through our channel, you'll see we cover a wide array of topics here, but it's not confusion at all. It's just part of the journey. And we're so glad to have you with us here. So yeah, so we're actually trying something new here. So again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I really do appreciate it. So anyway, with that being said, in today's broadcast, we're going to cover quite a few topics here today, about 4 topics to be precise. Number one, in our first segment, we're going to get into talking about rent control. Some of y'all in our earlier video that we did, man, you were really liking the idea of, the people were putting in the comments, they were like, I hear what you're saying about what's going on in LA, but at the end of the day, I'm protected because I live in a building that has rent control. Well, we got something for you, because there's a lot more to that whole legislation than meets the eye. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get in, get a little more into the details of that so you can see a much wider picture of that. OK, the next thing we're going to get into is, recently there was this whole thing about the black farmers, and you may have seen the gentleman, it's an older black guy that wears like a black cowboy hat, and he leads like this black farmers union, and they recently got, I believe it was like a $2 billion payout, and it sounds, everything about it sounds very good. It's like, man, finally they're getting their just due. But there's a little bit extra to the story that I didn't know until I actually looked into it. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And it's something they're not really talking about, but we're going to talk about it here. We're going to get into that. The next segment is going to be our health and wellness segment. And we're going to talk about some things that just went down recently. I think I may have posted it or mentioned it in a broadcast. There's a couple of things that are going on right now as we speak, and we're going to touch on that. So we have a health and wellness segment that we're going to get into. And then finally, we're going to get into talking about DEI. I can't tell you how many people I think who are just so rah about Kamala, and they're just like, yes, DEI. And you don't realize what you're bringing into diversity. Inclusion? No, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was getting ready to say it the other way around, but you know what I mean. But yeah, so there's a lot of people that don't fully realize what you're asking for. And I'm going to add even more to that. So hopefully it'll open some eyes, what we're going to talk about with that, and what you're actually asking for by being okay with DEI. And I'm telling you right now, who's going to suffer the most from it are going to be people who look like me. All right. So that's what we're going to cover. There'll be some other things we're going to throw in there as well. So again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. Let's go ahead and get into the news. Now, for many of you, you have already seen or heard about that Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, who's running for president. Well, she just dropped her economic plan. And if you've been following this platform, and I'm sure, and other platforms have mentioned it too, part of her team, she has 2 individuals that were former employees of BlackRock. Well, the thing about DC politics, there are no former employees. It's just like when you see people say they are former CIA and never former CIA, you're still using all of those connections, right? And so when you look at her economic policy, she's leaning heavily on some of the agendas of BlackRock when it comes to housing and rentals. And so it's, if you're not familiar with it, you better familiarize yourself with it. But there was a few of you in the video that we did regarding LA and what it appears to be this, by 2028 when the Olympics come, which I forgot to mention in that video, is that in 2026, I believe FIFA is going to be there. So that's a whole nother, that's like a mini Olympics that's coming there. So LA is about to go through some major changes, especially if you are a resident there. I'm telling you, you better buckle down. And looking at that chart, is it 110% accurate? I'm not swearing on that at all, but I can tell you, as a former resident of Los Angeles, I have seen the change. And there's many people in the comment section that are firsthand witnesses as well, is that the black population in that city, they're going elsewhere. And they're even going beyond just, Inland Empire or, some of the other places. They're even leaving the state, along with a lot of other people as well. So it's quite interesting, and it's sad in many ways because, again, LA is a city that our history is very rich there, and to see, it all pretty much get abandoned, it's really a sad state of affairs there. But anyway, but there were a couple of, it was about 2 or 3 of y'all who had left the comments in our comment section, was saying that, hey, listen, my prices aren't going to go up when it comes as far as my rent is concerned, because see, we have rent control. Well, there's a couple of videos that I want to share with you that's going to kind of touch on that. Well, the first one I'm going to share with y'all is a video from a woman who has many years of experience in the real estate industry. She actually took a look at the Kamala Harris's plan as it pertains to housing, and she's going to do a little breakdown. I think the video is about a 5-minute clip. And then afterwards, I have another video that I'm going to show you that's going to go even further in talking about the real impacts of rent control. This is something you're going to really need to know, because I have a feeling that there's quite a few of you guys out there who believe that you're being protected by daddy government with this policy. But I don't really, you're only looking at it on the short end. But there's a lot of things that you need to consider, if you're leaning on that. So let's get to the clip, and I'll be right back.
The Kamala Harris-Tim Walz campaign is unveiling a housing plan today. As a housing expert, someone who's been in the business for 24 years, owns my own firm, and has been heavily involved in policy issues at all levels of government, I felt obligated to bring y'all some viewpoint on what's going to be rolled out, especially since I seriously doubt that the National Association of Realtors is going to make commentary on a presidential campaign's policy. The first item you're going to see talked about is a wonderful plan to call for the construction of 3 million new housing units. Now, that does sound good, and I agree that it's good to have conversation about the fact that our supply is the problem, not so much demand. However, couched in that wonderful little headline is a real problem, friends, because their goal is to have the federal government take over zoning. Zoning should only be under local control. Cabarrus County, North Carolina, where I am, is wildly different than Mecklenburg County right next door. And frankly, we don't have the foggiest idea what's best for Syracuse, New York, or Kansas City, Missouri, or even Kansas City, Kansas. There is no universal housing market. There is no universal housing plan. If the federal government gets to take over zoning, friends, here's what that looks like. That means that you may have a parcel of land that you would like to develop, and the federal government says yes or no as to what you can do. I don't like giving the federal government any control when this country was built to make sure that every zip code could have its own personality and its own leadership. So yes, we need new housing, but not at the expense of local controls. The second thing being proposed is, of course, rent control. And that sounds good if you're in a rental and you feel like you're paying too much. Friends, the way that you solve the high cost of rent is to add more rental units, but not rental units by hedge funds, which has been the plan for the last few years. What we need are more mom and pop investors that are able to make local decisions about zoning and local decisions about their land so they can provide more units. When you put in rent controls, that caps what I as a landlord can charge for rent. That sounds okay if you're the consumer, but friends, it's been tried in all kinds of markets, all kinds of cities, and it does not work because as an investor, I'm not going to put my money into something where I can't control the market conditions. I mean, I can never control market conditions, but I can't respond to market conditions. Pay attention. Every city that has rent controls loses rental units. What happens when you lose units? That's right. You have another supply issue. This is not good. It is terrible. And by the way, if you're a tenant, you can get trapped in your unit because let's just say you and your family have a large rent-controlled unit, and then those wonderful children grow up and move away. I feel ya. Well, now you're in this giant unit, but you can't afford to move because you're trapped by your low rental cost. Meanwhile, a young family down the hall wants to move into your larger unit, but they can't because they're trapped too, and they're just out of space. It is not a good way to control a market. Rent controls are bad. What we should have instead are better local zoning decisions. Now, the third thing in this plan is that there's going to be an offer of free money, down payment assistance, help those first-time buyers get in a house. I love down payment assistance, especially when it's done by tax credits, when it's done by bond money approved by voters. Y'all, if the federal government wants to hand people money for buying houses, that's what causes inflation. How is it going to be that we can get y'all educated on this? Every time the government starts printing money, as young people say, it goes brrr. When the Fed prints money, that causes inflation. And so when you add $25,000 in free money to a house, you just drove the cost up by $25,000. I just wish that when any political person rolls out a housing plan, they'd talk to some of us in housing first. Friends, these decisions might sound big picture. You might not be interested in housing policy, but what you need to know is that these decisions will impact you, your decisions in your pocketbook, so vote accordingly.
So one of the things that people need to understand is that, okay, like I was just saying earlier, okay, so you got this apartment and you're locked into your low monthly rental. Okay, good for you. But that's from your perspective. From the landlord's perspective, what you have to understand is prices going to continue to go up for the landlord. You know, when it comes to maintenance, when it comes to taking care of those things, the landlord doesn't have control over those prices. So in other words, if there's mold, you know, in your unit or in the units, you know, the price that it would cost back in 2020 is going to be much higher today in 2024, you know, or any other things that are needed when it comes to that. So even though the tenants aren't covering that, it comes to the landlord. Now, the landlord in a lot of these cases, many of these landlords, they do have other properties, so they're able to find the money somewhere, but that cost is still getting passed on to other people. And this is why there's stories, and I have another video I'm going to share with you in a little bit, where there are units out there that are rent controlled. However, they're not seeing the maintenance that they would like to see because, again, something has to give.
Nearly half of all apartments in New York City are rent stabilized. That's causing big problems for some lenders thanks to a 2019 law that many didn't think of much at the time. Leslie Picker joins us now from a very special place I think I see there to explain what this is all about. Leslie.
Yeah, David, this here is what an apartment can look like when a tenant moves out of a rent-stabilized apartment after living here for nearly 30 years. At the time, this apartment went for $775 per month. For a full year, it sat vacant because the landlord says it needs $50,000 worth of renovations just to bring it up to code. Since 2019, many such renovations have been unaffordable for landlords because of a New York law that caps rent-stabilized increases at 3% in order to tackle housing affordability in the city. As a result, property values have plummeted 60 to 70% over the last 5 years, a degradation that is now trickling down to the property lenders, New York Community Bancorp being the poster child of this phenomenon. The landlord of this apartment said he's getting squeezed because his revenue is declining, with some apartments no longer habitable, all while his taxes, insurance, and interest rates are going up.
You're seeing foreclosures left and right. You're seeing banks going under. It's something must be done. The status quo is not tolerable. We are watching our buildings disintegrate before our eyes. There's no money to be put into it.
A recent report by D.A. Davidson found NYCB is the most exposed here, as well as Flushing Financial, Dime Community, Northfield, and Valley National. A new study, though, from the city comptroller said that the 2019 law has not led to an increase in vacancies or distress among rent-stabilized housing. The city says the number of vacant rent-stabilized apartments unavailable to be rented actually declined 39% between 2021 and 2023. Guys.
All right. And then this final video, it comes to us by way of Fox 5. And they're talking about, again, rent control, the impacts. This time we're looking at the city of New York, and you should see the unit. And but it's rent control, though. They saving money, but the unit, man, it's just what it is. And they're talking about how, some of these units are just literally sitting empty, and they're going to get into that. So let's take a look at this video and let's find out.
It happens all the time across the city. Landlords allowing rent-stabilized apartments to remain vacant for a number of years.
All right, Fox 5's Antoine Lewis digs into how often it happens and what's being done to increase transparency.
Rent-stabilized apartments are highly sought after in New York City, but the number of those available for renting is the subject of a just-released report from the nonpartisan New York City Independent Budget Office. The IBO says that more than 13,000 apartments sat vacant for at least 2 years between 2021 and 2022. Sarah Stefanski's team analyzed the data.
There's been a lot of speculation around rent-stabilized apartments sitting empty for long periods of time, but not a lot of underlying data behind that discussion. There could be multiple reasons. It could be a property owner is in the process of renovating an apartment. A property owner is looking for a particular tenant that they haven't found yet.
The IBO says last year landlords listed more than 42,000 rent-stabilized apartments, which for a city struggling to make affordable housing available wide scale is eyebrow-raising for some.
Owners don't want those apartments to sit vacant. It makes no sense. A vacant apartment helps nobody.
Frank Ricci, executive vice president of the Rent Stabilization Association, says from their perspective, a number of vacancies are the result of changes to the law in 2019 that restrict rent increases for stabilized units, especially if significant repairs are needed to make an apartment habitable.
And it could be anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000, depending on the size of the apartment. But under the current law, the owner is only allowed an $89 a month increase. So let's say you have a $700 a month apartment. You have to put in $50,000 to get $89 a month back. Your rate of return is going to be 30 or 40 years.
Landlords are not required to say why an apartment is empty, but a more detailed registry of New York City empty apartments is part of a bill recently introduced by Brooklyn City Councilman Lincoln Ressler.
And if apartments have been vacant for extended periods of time, then we ensure that the landlords provide information. Is it habitable? Why has it been vacant? So that we can enact the necessary policies to maximize every single available apartment in the city of New York.
Antoine Lewis, Fox 5 News.
Okay, now I want to bring your attention to this article that I found. It's on the Foundation for Economic Education website, and the title of the article is "The Results of St. Paul's Rent Control Experiment Are In," and they're disastrous. So it doesn't sound like it's working too well, at least for St. Paul. All right. So I'm not going to read the whole article, but we're going to get right to this one part that I want to focus on. And they're actually quoting Thomas Sowell. Okay, sorry about that. How did I mispronounce his name? Anyway, here we go. It says, here are just a few examples he offers, and this is in his book, Basic Economics, which I have condensed. Okay, here's the first one here, and this is in regards to rent control. And he says, in Melbourne, Australia, not one housing unit was built for 9 years. 9 years, because rent control laws had destroyed the profit motive. The next point, they said in Santa Monica, California, in 1979, the number of building permits dropped by 90%. 90% in just a few years, because again, rent control laws had destroyed the incentive to create new housing. And then the final point is, in the 1970s, residents in Washington, D.C. saw housing stock decline from 199,000 to less than 176,000. Why? Because many people decided to stop renting their homes because of price controls. See, this is the much bigger picture that you have to consider, because for some of you, you get the point as far as, you may, you see overall how the Black American community is being impacted, but you think you're sitting pretty in your little house because you're still paying $700 or $800 a month. You know what I'm saying? And, but it's impacting the entire community, and you're really not going to see the growth that it does require to get things done, because taxes need to be charged so that the city has money to be able to dole out to keep things maintained and all that other stuff. But if you got everybody at one level there, people aren't really making money to be able to do those things. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so that's that. And then I have this other article here. This is from same place. We're going to St. Paul, Minnesota. And the mayor, Melvin Carter, in one article here, this is back in October the 12th, 2021, he said he's going to vote yes on the St. Paul rent control. All right. So that was, again, this is going back in 2021. He was okay. He was gun-ho with it. But then you get to August the 13th, 2024, the same mayor, guess what? Guess what he's saying now? He's saying St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter wants to scale back rent control. Why? Well, let's read the article a little bit. It said, what did he say here? Citing a slowdown in housing production, St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter is proposing the city change its rent stabilization law to permanently exempt units built after 2004. And it says this move marks a concession to developers who have said the city's 3% cap on residential rent increases hampers their ability to finance projects in an already difficult economic environment. And then it goes on, the article goes on there. So here you go. This is how it plays out as far as the rest of the community is concerned. And these are things that people need to understand. I'm speaking specifically to Black Americans here, because again, you can't, because there's going to be all kind of politicians that, including Kamala Harris, that they're going to be throwing these things out. We're building these communities here that, hey, it's going to be rent control. Your rent's not going to go up and all of that stuff. But at what cost? At what cost to the rest of the community? You understand what I'm saying? So these are things you need to kind of consider, when you're talking about that. And I figured that, and I said, you know what? I do want to talk about this particular topic because, people need to know, you don't just look at things just at one level. You got to look at all the things that it's connected to. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, let's move on to the next topic here. My goodness. Oh gosh. When I saw this story here, I just, it's really something. Now, I'm on the Digital Plantation here on YouTube. So there's certain things I want to say in what I'm about to talk about here, but I can't say it on here. Okay. But let's just say this. This is really something. Okay. So as many of you know, about 4 years ago in a galaxy far, far away, there was a time I'm old enough to remember there was a time that you couldn't go into any store without wearing a mask. You had to have your face covered, right? If you didn't have your face covered, you weren't permitted to go into certain stores, right? Remember all of that, right? You got to do it because it's going to protect you, all right? So now, we're in this phase of, we were hearing all this stuff about bird flu. Bird flu is coming. Oh, it's coming. I can hear the birds coming right now. All of a sudden, that just dropped. You notice that? I haven't heard anything else about no bird flu, right? Well, the birds couldn't handle it. They must got tired and say, you know what? It ain't working. So then they put a call out to the monkeys because now we got monkeypox coming, okay? So now they're calling this the monkeypox. So people are out there afraid. And I know for me, being out where I am, I've already seen people wearing their masks. It's not too many, but there are people out there doing it, again, because of what's being put out here. And they're out here saying now, oh, it's coming. Oh, and guess where it's coming from Africa. Have you noticed, a lot of the imagery they've been putting in these articles about monkeypox? It's the black guy that's just covered and he just, oh, God, you don't want this. I said, that it just continues. Anyway, the fear campaigns continue. But anyway, so you have people who wear their masks. Well, we also know you got people who wear masks for nefarious reasons, right? Especially in places like big cities, New York, some of these other places, they want to commit a crime or something like that. They were using this as an excuse or as a way to commit crimes, but at the same time, they faces covered because, if I get caught, hey, listen, I just have my face covered because I don't want to catch this stuff. Well, amongst the nefarious things, it sounds like you had individuals who were targeting the Jewish community. Okay. And so, of course, they're going to come together like Voltron and they're going to get something. They're going to get legislation done. That's the one thing about those folks. They're going to get things done, right? Well, anyway, let me play for you this clip here, and we're going to go to Nassau County, New York. Let's watch this clip, and let's take a listen on what they're doing now.
In Nassau County, Executive Bruce Blakeman signed a bill into law today banning masks and face coverings.
Blakeman calls the legislation common sense. His opponents call it unconstitutional. Doug Williams has more.
Take your mask off. Don't be a coward.
4 years ago, this press conference in Nassau County may have required masks to attend. On Wednesday, they were banned.
This is a bill that is going to protect the public.
County Executive Bruce Blakeman says there are exceptions for medical and religious reasons, religion itself at the heart of the legislation. Several speakers on Wednesday were Jewish advocates or victims of anti-Semitic hate crimes. Among the crimes, they say, committed by criminals using masks to hide their identities.
Any group trying to intimidate another group, and the majority of them are wearing masks, there is an ulterior motive.
Some people need to hide their identity if they're guilty of something.
Several organizations and advocates have spoken out against the legislation, including NRGG, Nassau Residents for Good Government.
Spending police time asking people why they're wearing a mask, that doesn't solve the problem of anti-Semitism, and certainly having a mask ordinance that's unconstitutional does nothing.
Folks that are against this legislation say it will make doing things like going to the grocery store more difficult and potentially more confrontational if you choose to wear a mask.
How do I know who's sick in there? This is something that they're thinking about and putting a ban on?
People are going to commit crimes no matter what, whether they're wearing a mask or not.
I'm an ICU nurse, so I have no judgment. If you want to wear a mask, you wear it. I'm not going to ask you.
But what if somebody judges you?
Too bad.
Nassau County Police say officers are already undergoing training.
Further question you, they could potentially detain you if you gave evasive answers.
Leave so much to the discretion of a police officer, whether the mask wearing is legitimate or not legitimate.
In Nassau County, Doug Williams, CBS News, New York.
Now, Governor Hochul is calling for a different approach to the mask issue. Instead of a ban, the governor said she's considering an added penalty to suspects charged in a crime committed while they were wearing a mask.
Could you even imagine? We would live in a time where just about 4 years later, you have counties now, this particular county now, they're outlawing them. So they went from telling you, you better put it on, to now they're saying, if we catch you with this thing on, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. Now, I tell you, this is something because it just shows, when I saw this, I said, it just shows me just how easily the population can be manipulated. Because we literally went from, if you don't wear it, basically you're not being socially responsible. And now we're at, well, even if you're scared of catching all of these things, you know, the reason why we're pushing this legislation is because of the Jewish population. So they take precedence over everybody. Ain't that something how that always works out? So you got people out here who are very fearful about catching stuff, and they saying, screw that. We don't want you scaring the chosen. So we're going to make sure that you don't do that anymore. And we're going to pass legislation to make sure that that they're not afraid anymore. Isn't that something? I wonder what they'll do that for black people. Probably not. Anyway, so we're getting ready to take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to get into this next story. Again, you're watching Samba News, and I'll see you right after the break. Now, we have gotten a lot of requests from people asking us, hey, where do you get your music from? You know, I really like the music that you're playing. Well, we do our own music here, and you can go to, if you go to sambatree.com, you actually see that we have 2 albums of music that you have. Listen, it's not even expensive at all. Our first album that we came out with is called Sound Time, and that's our first debut album that we put out. It's got quite a few songs on it. It's $4.99. You can't beat that at all. All right. Our second album is called Course Correct. We just dropped that just really recently. That's $3.99. Okay, it has fewer songs than Sound Time, but nonetheless, that album I actually took the time and really focused on my writing, you know, and so a lot of the songs you see on there are songs that I actually wrote myself. I'm talking about the lyrics, and yeah. So if you're interested and you're wanting some good music to kind of play around in the house or in the car, or you just want some chill music or whatever, head on over to sambatree.com and go to the section for new arrivals, and you'll see it. And once you pay for it, it's an immediate download. So you'll immediately get it. You don't have to wait for somebody to send you a CD, because that means you're dating yourself. Okay. You know, but no, we ain't going to send you out a CD. You'll just get an immediate download. It'll send you a link. You can just download it, and then you can go ahead and get to town. So again, check out sambatree.com for that music. All right, in our next story, we're going to get into, I know you've seen this guy before. He is the president of the NBFA. I believe that means the National Black Farmers Association. And they have been in the news recently because they just won a $2 billion lawsuit or whatever. It was a payout, you know, because of disenfranchisement or whatever. You know, and, you know, the government was shortchanging him. And so he always goes, you see him at the Capitol. He's got the black cowboy hat and he's got the horse with him. And, you know, he's making his case. Well, that all apparently, I guess they paid off. So now, because now they're getting $2 billion. OK, and it's going to be spread not just to black farmers. Let's be clear about that, because when you read the fine print, they say black farmers and other farmers of color. Okay, so again, it's the games again. Okay, it's the word games again, and the black face is always used as the Trojan horse in these situations. So yeah, it's not just black farmers in the actual text of it. It also mentions in other farmers of color, whoever that means. Okay, and so anyway, so that's how that works. But there's another part to this story that I didn't think about, and I thought it was quite interesting. What I'm gonna do is this is a video that I'm about to play for you. It's about a year old. I think it's about a year old, and the gentleman's name, again, his name is John Boyd Jr., and you're gonna hear him talk about a policy that he was helping to push, and the irony is it's a policy that has been very damaging to many parts of the Black American community. Let's go to the clip.
Now we're going to switch gears to some more folks who want some help. Farmers across the country are pushing Congress to pass an immigration bill. According to the USDA, 73% of agricultural workers today were born outside of the United States. It is essential work that puts food on Americans' tables. It is often done, as you see there, by folks that are not from here. Now, in this lame duck congressional session, farm workers hope the Senate will pass the Farm Workforce Modernization Act to boost the agricultural visa system. Joining us for an inside look at how this legislation could impact the farming industry is fourth-generation farmer John Boyd Jr. John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we know that farmers and farm workers, they're taking time away from their crops and livestock so that they can lobby Congress, which I'm sure you just love. How significant would this be for farmers if this legislation is passed?
Well, this legislation is very, very important for America's farmers, especially livestock producers. And many people don't understand that livestock farmers need help year-round. It's not more like seasonal work for vegetables and things of that nature. And I used to raise eggs for Purdue Poultry for 14 years. And it's 7 days a week around the clock. And it's hard to find workers, that want to do this kind of work. The real answer would be to get more Americans and more young people interested into farming and agribusiness in the United States. But it's not happening quickly enough, and farmers rely on these workers every day to help get their crops in and help maintain their farming operations. So this isn't a new bill. It's been there for a while, and it's just starting to get some headway, and hopefully it will pass shortly.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. There are not Americans that want these jobs. I mean, 73% of agricultural workers being immigrants, that is a very high number. But also, I wonder if it's lower than it really is, because that's the folks that we know about. And we also know that when you need labor, you're willing to take help from anywhere. And you might not necessarily ask those folks where they're from and how long they've been here.
Yes, and I've been farming for 40 years, a very, very long time. The average age of a black farmer in this country is 61 years of age. And the problem is we just don't have a lot of young people that are raising their hand that want to do this hard work. It's hard work, but it's the most rewarding work that you can do. Farming, the oldest occupation known to man and the hardest occupation known to man is farming. But we need more young people to get into it and to really take some interest in where their food is being produced. And again, so these workers would be very, very vital to these farming operations. And we hope that we can get this bill moved and signed into law so that farmers can get the labor and to help keep feeding America and feeding the world is what's happening here.
So as the Biden administration considers its strategy when Title 42 goes away, as they try to look at immigration, do you think farmers are looking at this going like, no, please let more people in the country. We need more help here?
I think what really needs to happen is real immigration reform in a severe way, and not more of a patch job like we've been getting here in Congress. We're trying to get what we can to do it to kind of keep things moving along. And what we really need is a long-term fix for immigration in this country. And it's going to take both parties to come together, and it's going to take a strong leader to get some real immigration fixed in this country.
Yeah, the Biden administration is sending air marshals down to the border to help with immigration, and you're going, give me help on my farm. It seems like the two sides are pretty far apart, but we'll see if this works out. That's John Boyd Jr., a fourth-generation farmer. We thank you for joining us.
Now, isn't that something? Isn't that something? Now, but let's not beat the man up. I mean, I want us to really let's think about this for a second. Now, what he's saying here is, that there isn't enough young black people who are even interested in farming. Now, that's what he is saying. But what I would like to know is, what specifically have they done to generate that interest? Because I still don't really believe that in its entirety, because, again, when you think about land ownership, and you're working your own land and, just doing what farmers do, right? There's a lot of people out there right now that are dreaming about such an opportunity where you can live that kind of life. There's many people. You go on YouTube, you can find many people out here that literally are living in their cars, because they want to live on a off-grid, detached kind of lifestyle. And, farming work is not easy. I get that. I understand that. But I do find it a little bit hard to believe that there ain't any black folks that are interested in continuing farming. And so by default, we need to just go ahead and keep the borders open so that I can have some workers. I don't know. What do you think about that? But what I also realize with that, regardless of the truth behind that or not, the other side of that coin is by pushing that policy, well, you know what's going on. All right. There's a story that was that I just read about a few days ago. Well, just recently, capital murder, that was committed by two Venezuelans and down in Texas. I think it was involved a 12-year-old girl. And man, and then I also read this other story again, Venezuelans in Aurora, Colorado. Same thing. They're dealing with the whole gang situation. And so although it's not the entirety of, Black American community, the demographic, there are many Black Americans who are being adversely impacted by illegal immigration. So is it worth that? Would you double your efforts and say, hey, listen, Black folks, I need help with these farms? Or you just saying, you know what, screw that. It's a lot easier for me to get some people down, coming from, the border. And let's cut the crap and let's be honest here. A lot of these employers, the reason why they want people coming from the southern borders is because you can pay them a lot less. Let's be true, sir, Mr. Boyd. Let's be true. Let's be honest here. And because a lot of employers, they know that they can pay these individuals a lot less, number one. And then number two, you can work them to the bone, basically. And there's many cases there's stories all over the place of particularly farmers who are taking advantage of these individuals that are coming from these other countries to work in these on these farms. And then you have a couple of farms that have gone through the court system because, again, they're being sued on the mistreatment of the poor treatment that they're getting. Yeah, just because Mr. Boyd is Black, I can't exclude him out of that. You understand what I'm saying? So again, I understand completely the whole tale on that one. And that is, it's a lot easier for him to do that, to go with people who come in from the southern border because he can pay them a lot cheaper. Okay, so that's the other side of it. And that's the part that you probably ain't going to hear him mention that, so but as far as his claim that there aren't, too many Black people today that's willing to take up that mantle of farming, I have a difficult time believing that. I really do. I think he's leaning more on the fact that he can pay people a lot cheaper, and like a lot of farmers, that's what they're doing. So anyway, that's just me. But I thought this was really interesting because this is a part of that whole Black farmer story that's been left out. This is the first time I'm hearing of it. Well, anyway, let's move on. This is a little special kind of segue segment I'm gonna throw in here. We're going to talk about is another clip that I came across. I've been bookmarking it for a long time. I believe I shared this with you some time ago. This is a while back, but I think it's worthy of sharing this again. And, it's this whole idea that people believe that slavery was something that took place a whole long time ago and is only something that's trapped in history books. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Slavery wasn't that long ago. In fact, you have some people who are still alive today that are, they're barely here, but nonetheless, they know what it's like to be a sharecropper, which was pretty much slavery with pay. And I want to play for you this very moving clip of this older woman who's talking about her experience on working on the plantation. And it's really heartbreaking to watch this. But the pain, this ain't back in the 1920s. I think this video was taken, it looked, if I had to guess, I want to say in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. It's really, really something. Let's go to this clip here.
All my life, I was in Kansas City. I stayed up there about 30 years. My son got killed. He was living with me. And I just couldn't stand it, be there in that house. And my son, somebody shot him down. And I left and come to Mississippi. But I've been staying in Mississippi, I don't know how long. Then I got up, started chopping cotton, picking cotton again. My mother was getting $15 a week for a whole week, 5 days, for the chop cotton, all that whole week for $15. We wasn't getting up sometimes. We'd be hungry. We have to go to the cornfield and pull up some corn and boil it and eat it. And that's where we were just about come. We ain't had nothing. Nothing. And so my mother got tired and she left, but she come back.
Miss Lucille, was you a sharecropper? Was your mother a sharecropper?
Yes. She done the same thing. $15 all the week for the wreck all the week. 5 days in a week. $15.
And show me how the process was. You were showing me something. You would be hoeing the cotton.
Yeah, like that. The cotton standing up there. And you have to chop on this side, chop on this side, go on up a little further, chop on this side, chop on that side. Go on up a little further. As you cut it down, you got to get it and stick it back in the dry. Oh, we were, I say we were on the slave. We have to do everything they tell us to do. Sometimes we want water. We couldn't even get it.
Was there a man on a horse over you or something?
Yes. Yes.
Did you ever see anybody get beat?
Beat? Just I got killed.
Do you remember the plantation?
The plantation, what you call it, Bayland, Mississippi. Bayland, Mississippi. That was a plantation. And I remember the boss man's name. But he been dead and gone, though. He been dead and gone.
You ever think about those days?
Yes, I do. And I...
What are you thinking about right now, Miss Lucille?
Yeah, think about what? The world is so vast. I wandered far and wide, searching for the answers, but always felt denied, seeking validation from others' love for peace. But deep inside I knew the answers lie within me.
Let's talk moringa powder, aka green gold. What's a super fast way to get your moringa powder in every day? I'm going to show you in this video. First, we're starting with our sambatree.com moringa powder. Do you see how green, bright, and fresh that moringa powder is? Love it. I love it. Okay, first we're going to start with applesauce. 1/2 cup. No sugar, no corn syrup, no natural flavors, just apples. Okay. And we're going to use 1 teaspoon of moringa. Okay, and we've just stirred that up until it's well blended. That's a good ratio for children, or if you're a newbie and you're just starting out. What I do is I take 1 tablespoon of moringa a day. Of course, I use more applesauce in order to mask the taste. Moringa is called nature's multivitamin, and they're not kidding. Take a look.
Just look at all these benefits: immune system, blood sugar, cholesterol, digestion, eye health. It's loaded. Here's to generational health, family, on Samba Tree.
All right, thanks for tuning in and welcome back. Let's get to our Samba Health segment here, okay? So anyway, this came out very recently, just in the past few days, this story here. I believe I mentioned it to y'all a little bit here, but I want to focus on it because it just really highlights a couple of things here. But anyway, let's go to the article here. It says, common kitchen spice contaminated with cancer-causing ingredient being hit by waves of recalls. All right, let's go ahead and get into the article. It says, cinnamon is quickly becoming one of the most recalled foods items in America this year after being found to contain toxic metals linked to cancer. Let's stop here for a second. Why on earth are you how are metals, toxic metals, ending up in cinnamon? That's probably, they go through the gears and all that, but still, how's that ending up in cinnamon? Anyway, let's continue. It says, earlier this week, El Shalar, hope I'm saying that right, LLC expanded its recall of Canela, Molida ground cinnamon after an investigation found traces of lead, becoming the 10th cinnamon brand to be recalled for containing the toxic metal. Officials have warned there is no safe level of lead, as in high doses, it has been linked to behavior issues, growth problems, and learning difficulties in children, hundreds of whom have been sickened in the past year. And in adults, agencies have classified it as a possible carcinogen. Now, you should be very concerned about this. Again, why is this in cinnamon? Why? And, if you look at over the years, you'll see, no, just over the years, over the few freaking months, I mean, there's been recall after recall and different things that we get in the grocery stores because they're finding this toxic stuff and then they're finding this toxic stuff and that or whatever. When is we as Black Americans going to really start taking control over our own food supply and what we put in our pantries? Well, I will tell you this. There are numbers who have been doing this for a very long time. There was a video I was watching, a Black Farmers Association in North Carolina. And these are local Black farmers that have come together and they, all of them grow their own produce. And basically it's kind of a co-op, and Black farmers have gotten together and Black Americans can go and get whatever they need. You just, you see what the schedule is and that's it. And you'll see this happening in certain spots throughout, particularly in the Southeast, you see this. So you have that. You have other Black folks who have been coming out with their own food, different foods and things like that. So to say that Black folks aren't doing anything, that's not accurate, and thankfully the narrative has been changing. We may not have been hearing about it on Wall Street and all of that, but it is happening. And I want people to understand that because it's very easy to look at what's not there. You know what I'm saying? Versus what is happening. And one of the things that we're doing here over, what we're doing in our store on Samba Tree, sambatree.com, is that we sell cinnamon, but it's not just any cinnamon. This cinnamon here that we actually offer is called, I want to make sure I'm saying it right. It's called Ceylon cinnamon. All right. Cinnamon. And we sell it. It's in the little, the sticks, right? So they literally scrape it off of the tree and they put it in a package and then they hand it to us. We ain't playing here. All right. And so I'll just read to you real quickly the advantages, all right, of this here. So they said most people don't realize this, is that if you live in the U.S. or Europe, that the cinnamon powder in your pantry is mostly like cassia and is not true Ceylon cinnamon. And they said a lot of times that cinnamon comes from China. So that's probably why they got all those toxic metals in it, because it's coming from China. Okay. But anyway, the biggest advantage of Ceylon, true cinnamon, is ultra low coumarin levels. For people who take cinnamon on a daily basis, Ceylon cinnamon is the best choice. So this is a much better and a lot pure form of cinnamon. And we sell it here over on sambatree.com. And so again, on Samba Tree, we're our thing is, like I said, and I'm gonna keep saying this over and over again, we got two focuses. Our overall top focus is to eliminate and to destroy high blood pressure and also diabetes. I believe these are low-hanging fruits, and it's very possible to do that. And like I said, we have many examples of people who are saying that they're seeing major improvements by just simply changing little things in their diet, and stop leaning so much on what they're getting out of the grocery store and start looking at these alternative natural sources. That's the key. I believe that everything our bodies need is found in nature. And this is what Samba Tree is about. We want to provide our people those remedies and those solutions. Okay. And that's what we do here at sambatree.com. So if you haven't been to the site, make sure you go and check it out. Okay. And I think this is just an example as to why we got to stop depending on these people to provide us with everything. We got to start coming up with our own solutions. And that's what we're doing here. All right. The next story. Now this one, it's tied to we're getting into the XXX topic here, and I'm not nudity. It ain't that. I ain't talking about that. Get your mind out of there. We ain't talking about that. What I'm talking about is, again, it's that topic again that I really can't get into detail about, but I'll just mention a little bit to you. Recently there was a report that was put out about the state of Iowa, and they're talking about there's been an explosion, an increase of rates of cancer in the state of Iowa. And so when I came across this story, it was this past weekend, and I took it upon myself to start doing a little investigation. And so what I can tell you is that there's a lot of correlation between those cancers and I can't say it. And so what I did was I laid out, the correlations between the cancers and the amount of Black Americans, and I did it down to the county level. And when you put it all together, it's like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is it. And so if you're interested and would like to see that information, we have that in our special group. We call it the hotline group. It's on the Threema app. Now the Threema app, if you want to get it, it's $5. $6, I think. That doesn't go to me. That goes to Threema. Okay. That's the cost of the app. And what we do is we use that group as a way to being able to openly discuss these things and being able to really analyze, talk about these things in the open, and also talk about some possible solutions and things like that. And so that's what we talk about over there. The information is on the screen. Once you get the app, make sure you hit me up, okay? And I'll immediately add you to the group so that you can be part of the discussion there, because I'm telling you right now, in these days, we're going to need to have venues where we can talk openly about this stuff. And what I did as far as this whole breakdown is concerned, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to see that too many other places. A lot of the places where I'm pulling information and data as it pertains to the, I can't say it, but a lot of the information I'm pulling, it's not coming from Black folks. is actually coming from mostly white people. But the white people, you know, a lot of these white people who are actually looking at this data and tracking this stuff, they're just pulling it from wherever. So it's white people, it's black people, and all of that. And it's good. I'm glad they're doing that, you know, and it's helped me to do what I'm doing. But I wanted to target specifically to black folks and what's been the impact. And I haven't found anything, nobody out here tracking it. And that's what we're trying to do here, you know, because I think it's very important. And so that's what I'm trying to do over in that group is, you know, really looking at the data and the details on this, because this has to be measured, you know. And so anyway, if you're interested, go join us on the group there and be a part of the conversation. Okay, so in this next story, man, this is really, really something. I've talked about this before, you know, on this platform, you know, in regards to how, you know, a lot of, you know, unfortunately, there's a high rate of Black American children in the foster care system. And we can get into the weeds as to the whys behind that. And there's all kinds of reasons, you know, a lot of times it's the dysfunction at home. You know, there's also many cases where the government just overreaches. You know, you have parents that are in prison, you know, there's all kinds of reasons. But this right here, I believe, is it really concerns me about the amount of children, Black American children, that are in the foster care system, because a lot of these children are being experimented on. And I've heard stories, I've seen things firsthand, and how a lot of these pharmaceutical companies are just doing all kinds of things, basically treat them like guinea pigs. And then what happens is that once they age out of the system, they're just thrown out there in the streets, and, you know, their brains are just fried. And so, you know, some of them are able to kind of put it together and get themselves together, and while others not so much. And even when you're on social media, you know, you can see that there's numbers of people out here, they're very troubled mentally. You know what I'm saying? And some of these people actually come through the system. So this video here is about 10 minutes long. It's talking about a type of experimentation that was going on in regards to HIV/AIDS and on children. I believe a lot of these children, because they mentioned like New York, I think it's centered around like what they were doing in New York. And so a lot of these children, you know, were Black American children. And I want you to take the time to really watch this, because again, this is another moving thing, and it's something that I really hope it stays in the forefront of your mind, because this kind of stuff is still going on to this day. So let's get to the video clip, and then I'll be right back.
The story is complicated. It involves our perceptions of the medical establishment, of how we think about the disease called AIDS, how we think about HIV testing, how we think about pharmaceutical companies, and I think for me, it was a real revelation.
Now let's go to the foster children, which I think was the most, to me, it was Tuskegee with foster children.
That was the most egregious.
Yeah. In the 80s and 90s, there were these AIDS drugs, and sometimes it was difficult to get parental permission to test experimental drugs on children. Why? AIDS drugs have very toxic side effects. Fauci and his team, the AIDS team and Fauci, went to the foster system in several cities. I think Pittsburgh and the city of New York were two that I remember. And they convinced these cities to, the wards, the people who were watching the foster children, to enroll their HIV-infected foster children in these studies so that they can get efficacy and safety data on them and do that.
Some of the trials, some of the protocols say that the children are, and I quote, presumed to be HIV positive. Now, what kind of society are we that children who are only presumed, and by whom are they presumed? What criteria makes them presumed to be HIV, that those children then get exposed to as many as 7 highly toxic experimental drugs?
And what I uncovered was that the promise that Dr. Fauci and his team made to these foster children agencies is for every child that you allow to enroll in this, we're going to give them an advocate, a patient advocate, to watch their well-being like their parents, because they're disconnected from their parents when you're a foster child. This patient advocate will watch the data, they'll be briefed, and they'll protect that child's personal and safety interests as they go through this, very toxic drug trial. And it turns out that in almost all those cases, the NIAID, Fauci's division, didn't provide that advocate after the fact. And what I dug up in records was there were 10 unexplained deaths of foster children in this trial. 10, not one, 10, very large number. And the ultimate investigation concluded that these were unexplained, mysterious deaths that were very troubling because of the fact that NIAID had not given them the protections of an advocate, somebody to watch out and be that child's parent as these drugs were being administered to. So very much like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment in the 40s.
In 92, the NIH decided that this population was going to be as good as any to test drugs on.
Aren't there rules against testing on children?
Yes, there are.
Under federal rules, consent for children to take part in drug trials has to be given by their parent or guardian. But the kids at Incarnation have no independent voice. The body that is their legal guardian, the ACS, is the same body that makes the children available for trials.
National Institute of Health rules against using wards of the state in clinical trials. But
how did they get around this?
Well, you get around it by appealing to public sympathy. If you go with the definition of AIDS that we have, which is a single cause, illness with no cure, blah blah blah, caused by one thing, instead of what it appears to be, the multifactorial, complex, treatable illness that occurs around the world because of poverty, drug toxicity, and other things. If you go with the first view, you can do anything you want.
So basically they're saying these babies have a death sentence anyway. It doesn't matter what we do. We can just do anything we need to do.
We're saving their lives.
Well, it is shocking that in New York City, experimental drug treatments are being used on children who are in foster care.
Even senior politicians in the city have found it impossible to get information about the trials. Bill Perkins is Deputy Majority Leader on New York City Council.
We do know that several have passed away during the course of these experiments, and we know that there are still some involved. And there's been somewhat of a secrecy about the whole matter, I must say. It has not been easy to get through the bureaucracy as to exactly what this is all about.
We're using toxic drugs on infants. We're using toxic drugs on children. Toxic drugs that cause genetic mutation, organ failure, bone marrow death, bodily deformations, brain damage, and fatal skin disorders. We're using that on orphans.
We're using that on orphans, and we're saying we're doing them a favor.
In a mass grave owned by the Roman Catholic Church close to Manhattan, over 1,000 children's bodies, including some who were enrolled in the trials, lie beneath a tarpaulin. Officially, their deaths are recorded only as resulting from natural causes. For months, we tried to get answers from those behind the trials. From Columbia Presbyterian Hospital, where many of the tests were devised. From Incarnation Children's Center, from the Catholic Church. And from the ACS, the authority ultimately responsible. None would comment. The drug companies which have supported trials at Incarnation include some of the world's largest.
What were some of the physical reasons that they were saying, I don't want this?
Some of them, they made them so sick that they couldn't get up and go to school. Or when they were in school, they couldn't function like the regular kids. So they just didn't, they didn't want it for whatever reason.
When they got sick, what kind of symptoms did they display?
Stomach cramping, mostly that, and constant diarrhea, that wouldn't allow them to stay focused in a classroom like a regular child would. Sleepy, a lot of the kids, they were drugged so much that they were just tired. They just couldn't function.
And Mimi, when the children refused to take the drugs, what would happen to them?
You could only refuse X amount of times. After that, you get a tube inserted into a G tube.
A G tube was inserted into the children. Did you insert that, or how did they?
Oh no, those are surgically put in.
So they were sent to doctors to get tubes that to put into their bellies to take the drugs.
Yeah. One of my kids came in, and a couple of months later, she came in. She was fine. She had a stroke and she went blind, and
after being given these meds.
Yes, because supposedly her case was she wasn't aware of her HIV status. So if he wasn't aware, he wasn't taking medicine. You're in there for that.
The perception there, and this is sort of drummed into everybody's head, is that the drugs will make you live longer. But longer than what? Longer than the perception that you're supposed to die at a certain age. So they'll say that the effects are very, 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 very strong, terrible. As Mimi says, a girl who had never been told that she was positive, therefore never took the drugs and was not sick, came in, and within a few months on these drugs, AZT and others, had a stroke, went blind, and died a few months later. Can't tell me that she lived longer. I don't think Mimi would say that either. But the general perception, and from doctors who want to defend this kind of thing is, yeah, they'll live longer than what? Not than they lived, than they were supposed to live. Who decided? The doctors decided.
And if the prognosis is that you're going to die, I guess any day past that is something that you could argue is proof of your argument. It's
very circular logic, and it only works in favor of the drug companies.
In this final segment here, I want to bring your attention again back to DEI. This is something I think I'm gonna keep bringing this up until people are really getting this. When you hear black Americans oftentimes pushing this and believing that DEI is something we got to defend with our life, what people are missing, the ones that are pushing this, and I'm talking specifically black folks that are pushing this thing. One thing you got to realize is that DEI, although it includes you, it also includes a lot of other groups that want to be you. See, this is the thing that gets left out of the discussion. And as much as you may want to, I try to bring this up, it just goes, for some people, it just goes in one ear and goes out the other. And I've mentioned, the examples. You got people who even though they're black or rather white, they can say, hey, listen, I identify as black. And so a lot of these women who are on board with DEI, what they don't realize is that you're now opening up the opportunity space out there, be it for a job or whatever it may be. If it's required for a black woman or a woman period to be hired for a particular position. Now under DEI, now it can also include someone who identifies as a woman. You understand? So you can't, it's the whole, you can't have it both ways, it only goes but so far. I mean, if you're trying to have it go both ways, it's going to crash in your face. You're going to get that wake up call real quick. And a lot of people aren't realizing that. The other day, I also did a video of a Christian woman who is found, is taking scriptures and twisting and turning them and justifying her support for DEI. And, and I challenged her on this. I said, well, how is this even possible once you start digging into who's all involved with DEI, And so what I want to focus more on are the people who who consider themselves transgendered. And I'm putting some images here on the screen because because a lot of times when transgendered people are talked about, but their images like this are images that oftentimes get left out of the conversation because people don't want to see that part of it. What you're looking at right now are images of what happens when a woman wants to transition into a man. And basically what they do is that they take your forearm because they need to get, if you get bottom surgery, because they need to get the skin from somewhere in order to formulate a new male part. And so besides them literally going into the reproduction area of the woman and basically gutting a lot of that out, in order to formulate or to create that male genitalia part, they got to get the skin from somewhere. Well, where are they going to get it from? Well, oftentimes they get it from the forearm. This is why you will see many people who are transitioning from a woman, and becoming a quote unquote man, their arms are jacked up. And this is really something. So this is under DEI. Now, for me personally, I've said this on this platform many times before. Regardless of what you want to identify is irrelevant to me. I don't care. I really don't. In other words, if I see a man dress up like a woman, if I'm somewhere, I'm not going to go out of my way to ridicule the person. I'm going to keep on moving to my destination, wherever that may be, the grocery store, to the park or whatever it may be. I don't have time to be doing and what you doing in this part of town foolishness. I don't do that. I don't have time for that. Okay. If I see one at the grocery store, again, I'm gonna look at them just like I look at any, because I'm focused when I go into the store, so I don't try to get into all this stuff. I mean, you take notice of different people, but that's about it. That's about as far as it goes for me, and I think most people are like that. But when when policies come into the room where they're actually forcing you to be personally accepting and loving this kind of stuff, well, that's where people tend to draw the line on that. And what my strong warning, again, is particularly to the black women that are pushing this, is that, again, you're going to get your wake-up call soon enough. And, with this whole policy and how it's going to clap back on you. You know what I mean? But looking at this, I mean, is this something that you consider normal? Do you really consider this normal? There are videos that you can find of people out here who have regretted even getting this type of surgery, but it's too late for them. This is one particular person that I've heard about. He's out here. He's old. If I had to guess, he's probably in his 70s, and an older white gentleman who transitioned like years and years ago. And then he realized, hey, listen, I made a big mistake. So he's detransitioning, but I mean, he's married, to a woman, but he can't do anything because it's gone, and there's lots of stories out there like that too, Let me play for you this clip. This is of Kamala, and she's talking about her support of, transgender. And again, this whole transgender thing, it does in fact fall under DEI. So let's roll the clip of with Kamala saying what she's saying about transgenderism and her support for it.
When I was Attorney General, I learned that the California Department of Corrections, which was a client of mine, I didn't get to choose my clients.
Right, a client of the Attorney General.
A client of the Attorney General, right. Of the Office of Attorney General, that they were standing in the way of surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. And there was a specific case. And when I learned about the case, I worked behind the scenes to not only make sure that that transgender woman got the services she was deserving. So it wasn't only about that case. I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need. And I believe it was not only, I know it was historic in California, but I believe actually it may have been one of the first, if not the first in the country, where I pushed for that policy in a Department of Corrections.
Okay, that is it. We have reached the end of this broadcast. Hey, listen, like I said in the beginning of this broadcast, this is a whole brand new format that we're trying here. And as you can, if you haven't been able to tell, I mean, it does take a lot of effort to put this together. Are you okay with this? Does this work for you? Because I'm really trying to condense and trying to get it in, get it out. You know what I'm saying? If this is something you like and you want to see more of this, do me a favor, hit the like button. Now, you know I typically don't ask for that, but I'm asking you to do it for this particular video here because I'm going to use that as an indicator like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. You know what I'm saying? So, you could put it in the comment section for sure. Let me know. That's great. But for the lazy of y'all out there, I'm just playing. I'm messing with you, but click the like button. Let me know, hey, listen, this is something I like this. I want to see more of this type of format. And let me know so I know I'm on the right track with this, okay? So anyway, I think that's it. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of Samba News. Thank you so much. You guys take care, and I'll see you again soon.